Morning, classmates. My name is Eric Hornbeck, and today I will be refuting the claim of Ryan Elroy that having a bullet train system in the United States would be beneficial to our country. My main refutation would be that my opponent has failed to give the audience unbiased support for the benefits of a bullet train, and he failed to bring to light the facts that would show that his deductive reasoning would not bring us to his conclusion. My opponent's first claim that bullet trains are more environmentally friendly than airplanes, he claims that if more people took bullet trains instead of flying, it would greatly reduce the amount of pollution from jet fuel in the air. Now, the problem with this argument he's trying to make is that it is all based on an assumption that if more people took the train. Brian Plummer from the Washington Post article, "High-Speed Rail Isn't the Most Effective Way to Cut Carbon Emissions," states that the Sierra Club, one of the most environmentally conscious groups in the country, does not support high-speed rail or bullet train projects, stating that the ridership of high-speed rail, with tickets as expensive as passage on most air carriers, will not convince the public to ride the rails for a trip that takes 2 to 5 times as long. The ridership will not just be there, leaving at least the state of California with an expensive toy with little hope of cutting emissions. Now, he also states that if reducing greenhouse gases is our primary goal, there are a slew of more cost-effective ways to do that than building a bullet train at the cost of $68 billion. Alisa Finley of the Wall Street Journal, March 3rd, 2004, in an article entitled "Jerry Brown's Magic Bullet Train," states legislative analysis office notes that the construction of a $68 billion bullet train would actually generate greenhouse gas emissions of over 300,000 metric tons over the next several years. My opponent's second claim, most of the rest of the world has a bullet train system. Japan's had one since 1964, so we're half a century behind. This seems like kind of a flimsy way of reason why we should have actually a bullet train. And if we're going to have an international keeping up with the Joneses argument, there are greater reasons. There might be a greater reason for having a better reason than having a bullet train. A country like Japan, which is 1/60th of the size of the United States, it might be beneficial to them. But in looking at our ranking on a website called Ranking America, viewed March 16, 2014, U.S. ranking in the world in different categories, children living in poverty, we rank 23rd. The number of civil liberties that we have as compared to other nations, we rank 16th. College graduation rates are 14th. Literacy is 15th. And our coverage of railways, we are already first. That'll be a key point in just a little bit. But it seems to me that if we're going to try to find things of benefit to our country in competing on a global stage, that there's far more important things for us to be doing than adding a bullet train to our list of accolades. My opponent's third claim was that bullet trains are the most safest way to travel, and he said that in Japan has never had a fatal bullet train crash in the 50 years of its operations, but Japan is not the only country to have bullet trains. I was looking on a website called, it was on Wikipedia on high-speed rail disasters over the last, I believe it was 100 years, or rail disasters over the last 100 years. And these were just the ones that were high-speed rail. Germany, June 3rd, 1998 had an accident with 101 deaths and 88 injured. Germany also had an accident August 4th of 1987 where there were 3 dead and 20 injured. Hung Long, China, which is also a country that has high-speed rail, July 23rd, 2011, there were 40 deaths and 210 injured. New Yorkshire, England, February 28th, 2001, 10 deaths and 82 injured. Spain had July 25th, 2013. This was a really big in the news last year. There were 78 dead and 260 injured. And one of the biggest ones in Ufa, Russia, June of 1989, there were 575 dead and 800 injured. So high-speed rail is definitely dangerous. The last claim that my opponent made was that bullet trains are more comfortable than airplanes. The trains and in trains, the seats are bigger and there's more room to stretch out and walk around. Now, I didn't have to look on any website or look this up, but have you ever seen first class passage on a Boeing 787 Dreamliner? They have lie-flat seating. They give you a drink before takeoff. They give you 5-star breakfasts, lunches, dinners, snacks. Flight attendants basically carry you around on a stick. So the fact that trains are more comfortable is kind of irrelevant. In closing, bullet trains will not lower greenhouse gas emissions due to lower ridership. They're not the best thing that we can do to increase our country's reputation. There are and have been incredibly deadly crashes, and we already have the best rail coverage in our country, or we have the best rail coverage in the world, and nobody's using it. So we don't need a bullet train to add to that. Thank you.
Well, Eric, all the structural stuff is very easy to follow. You label Ryan's points, and it sounds like you're going to be challenging the grounds and the reasoning that the advocate presented. I didn't really hear a lot of criticism of the advocate's evidence. I did hear some good challenges on the reasoning because of the comparisons that you're making there. So, for example, the conditional statement on the first point, if they actually use the trains. And I like the fact that you cited an environmental group that has very little faith in the ability of the ridership to be particularly high and make a difference in greenhouse gases with the California bullet train, for instance. They're not, the Sierra Club not being a fan, I think that's one of those things that gives some, it's an example of reluctant testimony. I think that it gives credence and credibility to the position that you're taking on this particular point. And you do mention as part of the evidence that you're going to be paying as much and it's going to be taking you 2 or 3 times as long to get to your destination, and that's one of the things that discourages the bullet train. I think when you talk about comparisons later on, especially to Japan, for instance, you might make an argument, because at one point you say, Japan's 1/60th the size. You might make an argument about how far people are traveling in the United States and what those distances represent in terms of time that you're talking about. And there's a reason why people pay in order to get, like from Northern to Southern California, they pay $150 to just get to 400 miles north instead of getting in their car and doing it for $50 because they it's the time issue. That's what they're paying for, and the bullet train's unlikely to compensate them for their time, even though it's supposed to go really fast. There's not really an explanation about why it's not going to be as fast. That would involve more criticism of the California train system itself, and that's not really the focus of the argument, so I understand that. I did think that you also followed up with a good argument about the carbon costs of building a train. You know, the advantage that all of those other systems have is that they're already in place. We'd have to start fresh, basically building this system, and that's going to create a lot of you had whatever it was, millions of metric tons of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as a result of that construction. I think that's a pretty reasonable challenge on the environmental point. I don't remember what whether or not the advocate made any quantifiable argument about the impact of the bullet trains. If they just made a general argument about, oh, it would be environmentally safe because you're not polluting the air or something like that because the planes are flying through the clouds versus the issues on the ground, I think you could do a little bit more contrast on that particular point. On the issue of the comparison, I thought that was a pretty reasonable argument to say, look, you know, why is it that we're playing keeping up with the Joneses on the bullet train? Train technology is not particularly new. Apparently the bullet train technology isn't new in Japan, so keeping up with the Joneses means that we have to adopt a technology that they were done with 50 years ago, and is that really, you know, going to be all that impressive for us? Where are we hindered because we don't have the bullet train? I think that's a legitimate question. And you say, well, we're not hindered in terms of our civil liberties and our poverty rate and all these other kinds of things. And in fact, we have the best rail coverage in the country. It may not be high-speed rail, but we do have lots of transportation, lots of things that are moved on railroads. And you know, why is it that the high speed is going to change any of these other kinds of things? I think that would be a legitimate way to maybe phrase that question. The safety issue, I did appreciate the fact that you went out and found some additional information on the point, okay, maybe they haven't had an accident in Japan, but that doesn't mean that high-speed trains are not subject to accidents, and you've got a lot of examples. Most of them seem to fit in the category of high-speed rail, although I'm not sure all of them do. It sounds to me like there may be some sweeping generalizations. You know, China has a high-speed rail system. Is that the system that they had their accident on? It wasn't clear to me. It seemed to me like you were making an inference there that's, I don't know. You know, I forget how many people died in the China accident. Was it 200 or something like that?
I think it was 80.
80. All right. And you know, so the question then is, was that a high-speed train? You know, they've got a high-speed rail system, but is the high-speed rail system what caused these accidents? The one example that you had on Spain, I think that was definitely applicable, and like I said, all of the train accidents that you listed, I think they're in countries that have high-speed rail. That's the argument that you're making there. Any that are specific to high-speed rail, I think that you had the German one was there were a couple of them that they cited that they were pretty specific. So I thought that was effective. What you did very well at the end also is summarizing the argument in telling us why it is that this is addressing the issue, because the advocate said that it's going to be better for the environment, it's going to put us in more contemporary times, and in the long run it's relatively safe, and you're saying those are the 3 points that they're making, and here's, I've demonstrated reasons why those things are not true. And I thought that the summary worked really well. That's a good way to finish off the argument.